As far as being able to showcase the LGBT community as kind of one of the, Filmmaker magazine, there's so many groups, the YouTube stuff, that people have put you out there as one of the guys that are showcasing films that are important in the community. As far as being in the South with that, it's got to be a little different than folks that are New York or LA based. I think the voice here has to be a little different, and it's got to be tougher maybe to some extent, but also maybe even more rewarding, because I think you're impacting a lot of people that don't have voices outside of what LA and New York or the bigger cities get. Can you talk about being a filmmaker in the South in particular?
Yeah. So, I am very grateful that I've had the chance to be a queer filmmaker living in the South and made a living doing that. In some ways, it's the reason, I think, why I've been able to make a living, because these stories, specifically, in the South, regional stories that aren't coastal, aren't told as much. And that way, I sort of fit into a niche of being a Southern queer filmmaker, and that's why my films got distribution. That's why I was able to screen at festivals and stuff. And it is difficult because a lot of times, these stories that are being told here are... my story came from my initial film came from my story, So I'm telling these very personal stories, and a lot of times these are like life-saving events. Being able to tell our own story is very empowering, and it's a way to save ourselves, And so I think there's a lot more at risk. But what's been amazing to me is that as all the stereotypes go about the South and these places that aren't giant coastal cities, I have felt very embraced, and I've felt that these festivals like Oxford, like Indie Memphis, like Sidewalk in Birmingham, places that you would otherwise be like, oh, it's probably not a safe space for LGBTQ people, specifically these film festivals have been great bastions of representing these communities and making sure that these stories are told. I think I showed my first film at Oxford like 10 years ago, and so it's really special to be able to be a part of this filmmaking community and to be able to be an out, proud gay person living in the South and representing these stories. I feel like it's a responsibility and it's an honor.
I love the cohesion that we see from Indie Memphis, Sidewalk. This little corridor has that kind of love, if you will. What's it like being able to kind of hit each one? I feel like you've been able to touch each film festival, and they are kind of your home base. It's got to be nice to be multi-state, but it's like one little group of area that's just perfect.
I think the coolest thing about these sort of festivals, and I think that you're right, there's Indie Memphis, there's Oxford, and Sidewalk to me kind of are like this trifecta, and you see a lot of the same people. There's a lot of similar jury members, there's a lot of similar filmmakers who are coming back year after year, and not only that, but having been going to these festivals for as many as 15 years, and some of the in Indie Memphis, for example, you see these festivals grow, and so somebody that you meet at a festival one year now is making studio films, for example, and it happened because of someone they met at a festival after party, and the conversation started. They were a producer, and then they go back home. They maybe even from LA, but they meet here in the South because LA is a big, wide open battleground, and they meet at this festival because these are really unique, intimate experiences here. When you're at an after party here, you can have conversations with people, prolonged conversations, not this like, when you're at Sundance, it's like totally insane. The parties are crazy, it's loud, and you get like a few seconds with someone, But here you could have really long, engaging conversations over an entire weekend, and these are meaningful connections, So beyond the potential like career impact and those sort of aspects, I just think it's a great a place to showcase work and to see peers showcase their work. And all the people that run these festivals are really great people who really care. None of them are getting rich off of it. And all of them have stayed true and loyal to the places that they're from and that they care about. And I think that's really special.
Tell me a bit about being able to change with technology, change with platforms where you can showcase films. I feel like so many filmmakers have a different type of voice they can get to because they can put it online. Streaming services are now, not maybe just the bigger ones, but YouTube especially is becoming big. How much fun has it been to kind of you've been one of those filmmakers that's flowed with the technology growth. Was that scary, or was it fun?
I think the only thing that was slightly scary about it is that my first film, for example, Blockbuster bought like a couple thousand copies of it. And that was, it was an incredible time for filmmakers who weren't necessarily going to be shown in theaters across the country, because this straight-to-video thing was a way to like really make a living. I mean, there was a lot of money in that, surprisingly enough. So that was a little scary once that went away, because the revenue streams were much different. So you had to be more creative in the way that you monetized your work. However, the ability to record a story in your bedroom and broadcast it to the world is something that is like invaluable. I mean, it's amazing. There are kids that on YouTube are just telling their coming out story, for example, and have like tens of millions of views. And how many lives have those videos saved, you know? So this goes for just the ability to tell a story. And then for filmmakers who are not just, having a vlog, but are actually telling stories and want to have various platforms for those things, I think it's tricky, because you can make a short film and put it on YouTube, but you're not necessarily going to monetize that unless you have tens of millions of views. And so while those, I think the similar thing has happened to the music industry, where there's like very easy to get out there on Spotify and iTunes and this kind of thing, but like the revenue streams that come back are difficult. I just think it's easier to get your work out there and actually have it be seen, but it's still just as hard, if not harder, to break through the masses to actually be seen in a large way. So I think it's important to constantly challenge yourself and not just be like, oh great, I've uploaded to YouTube and I've uploaded to Vimeo, let's see what happens. You have to get them on those platforms, for example, and then really push them, go to festivals, meet people, get press, in order to fight through this insane battleground of millions of videos being uploaded per day, So it's really cool, but it's not, it's not as easy as it seems.
There's still problems with it, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of problems just because anyone can upload anything, and I think that's beautiful. It's just like, it's not the answer in terms of like democratizing filmmaking, unless your plan is just to be poor your whole life and not make a living off what you do. That's one option.
Hopefully not the main one, yeah.
No.
I've got to ask, 9 years ago, so when you brought your first film compared to bringing the film this year, how much have you changed? How much have you grown from that? And do you see it in your own films? I mean, is it reflective, do you feel, in your films?
Yeah, so the biggest difference for me is that I'm married now. My husband just got a job in Chicago, so we relocated, and I'm back and forth, working mostly in the South, but back and forth. The cost of living has gone up, so I have to make a living. So I've gone from primarily making no-budget films with non-actors, which is how I got my start and how I got into Blockbuster, for example, and on Netflix. But gone from that to this short film that I'm playing here this year, The One You Never Forget. I'm working with working actors that act on the show Empire, and my star Malik Whitfield was in the movie Temptations and nominated for a lot of awards, and it's the first time I hired actors, had to fly them into Memphis, put them first class, and figure out a way to make all that work as a tool to be a run-up for my next feature film, which I'm writing, which is going to have a larger budget, and we're going to attach cast to it that can hopefully have a meaningful impact and break through and set my career in a different path. I've made a lot of no-budget movies and had an incredible career that I'm so grateful for. I'm just right now sort of trying to switch gears and see if I can take this in a different direction. And so I've changed in the way that I approach my films. Like, I used to write a film, start casting whoever I would find wandering around my city at coffee shops that I would think was interesting, and then would shoot those films in available time slots. Whereas now, I produce or AD 2 or 3 films a year for other directors, which I get a lot out of. And then meanwhile, I'm writing and planning to make my next film. And that's kind of my path right now. I'm, I guess, a little bit more of a professional and trying to figure out how to make a living like everybody.
Well, Morgan, I hope people get to see that change. I mean, I think we've gotten to see it here at the festival. Is there, with that new path, does that mean you'll be able to shoot in Chicago, or are you wanting to stick with the South?
Yeah, no. I will not. I have no interest in shooting in Chicago. So we moved there for my husband's job, which I'm so he's a social worker. He's doing actual really important good work in the world, and I am still, my heart and soul are in the South, and I have no interest in telling. I mean, plenty of people tell stories out of Chicago. You know, I still am driven to tell Southern stories and stories that are rooted in this region, because I just don't think there's enough of them. And I also really appreciate the excitement and drive that is behind films being made in regions like this, where there's not as much of a jaded film industry. You know, in Chicago, you start talking about wanting to make a movie, and you know, it's like a dime a dozen, and also you have to worry about there's a lot of roadblocks and things in the way. I just don't really have an interest in I don't have a connection to Chicago like I do here, you know. This is where I was raised, this is where I found myself, and where I continue to want to push these stories out from.
Well, we love what you do. We hope you keep doing it, and we can't see what this new endeavor. Can't wait to see a feature come soon. So thank you for coming back to Oxford, and we'll keep following you along in this little circuit. I think it's perfect.
Cool. Thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure.